Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be joined today by Eliza Pesuit. Did I do it right? Okay, great. She's an old friend of mine from my days as an ED, and it's just been so amazing to watch you grow Global Glimpse over the years and all of your work building really strategic partnerships. And I know it has not always been the smoothest sailing road. And so I just so appreciate your willingness and your openness to support other nonprofit leaders to help learn from the things that you've learned since you started. But why don't you share a little bit sort of about your background and what brings you to this conversation today?
Sure. Thanks, Mallory. It's such a joy to be here with you all. I have to sort of reality check myself because 4 years ago, I remember sitting down and being like, I don't even know what a corporate partnership proposal looks like. I don't even know what a corporate partnership is. Like, who does Coca-Cola partner with? So starting from ground zero is very, very normal and expected. And there's just a tremendous opportunity in this moment for all of us to be building on the energy that we're seeing across the corporate sector as companies try to figure out how to align their business needs with the values of the people that work for them and with the needs of the communities that support their companies. So yeah, I'm executive director at Global Glimpse. We partner with public high schools across the country, and we run leadership, global learning, and international education programs for mostly low-income students of color. We have been building our organization for 12, 13 years now, and I was the first full-time staff, so I've seen it from, a teeny tiny spreadsheet budget to well over 6 million and served 7,000 students, raised more than $13 million in scholarships for students, and now I can say built multi-million-dollar partnerships with a number of incredible companies, mostly in the travel space. And so I come to the conversation just really excited about where the sector is in this moment, motivated to help others navigate the complex nature of cross-sector partnerships and really deepen the work that they're able to do through the resources and the connections and the passion that does exist outside of the nonprofit sector that can really help us do our work in a more profound and powerful way.
Okay, we're off to a great start because I love everything that you just said. And I actually think it frames up this conversation in a really important way, which is that you and I both believe a few things that I sort of want to call out for folks if they're like, is this the right conversation for me to be listening to around corporate sponsorships and partnerships? I think we both really believe that good is happening outside of the nonprofit sector, and that businesses, many of them, not all of them, are genuinely either starting from a place thinking about social impact and social good, or trying to pivot to a place where they're better global citizens and serving communities and their employees differently, better, more in line potentially with the way we see value in the nonprofit sector. And so I think that's an important thing to sort of call out, because when I started, I grew up in the nonprofit sector, and I feel like I believed, even coming out of college, that if you wanted to do good in the world, you went into the nonprofit sector and you were sort of fixing all the things that corporate America was breaking. And that led to a lot of, mindset issues around what it looked like to partner with companies. And so I just sort of wanted to say that. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that as we sort of kick this off.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I look back at my own education, I don't know when it started, but in my mind, business was a bad word. Finance was a scary thing. Anybody who was money hungry was bad. And having been someone who's raised money and I guess is a fundraiser, though I never thought of myself that way. It's more, I'm deeply passionate about something and I bring the resources to make it happen. But I've learned over the years how wrong that concept is. And as we look at building sustainable models for our planet, for our communities, for our young people, we have to be integrating business and doing good. They need to be one and the same. And nonprofits are businesses. We have to build sustainable, successful businesses to do the good work in the world. So I 100% resonate with kind of what you're saying. And it's something I really work to teach our staff, every single one of them, and our students, like, know the finances of the organization in and out. Ask the tough questions about how a company you want to work for is structured, and how their benefits are structured, and how their, employee development pathways are structured. Like, know how to talk about business out the gate and spend your time there early on, because then your capacity to do good is going to be multiplied so much more.
Yes, 100%. And I think the other thing it brings me to, that I know, we were talking a little bit before I hit record, is this idea that when you have the mindset that businesses can and should and need to be for good, and that we need to partner with them, you also then can approach this conversation around how to build corporate partnerships from a place of mutual benefit and win-win, right? And I talk about that a lot. That's sort of the underlying framework of Power Partners. And I think the thing I say is, like, look, this is only for you if you are prepared to open your mind to that concept, that you do actually want to support an entire ecosystem of money movement, because that's what it takes to build sustainable, lasting partnerships. So talk to me a little bit about sort of like how you maybe even arrived there at that sort of like, how do you build mutually beneficial partnerships, and what it's meant for you and for the organization since you did.
Yeah, I'll give you all some like real anecdotes, because none of this happens overnight. I think I, from the beginning, have thought about our work at Global Glimpse differently. We, from our founding, have worked to be both earned revenue generating and philanthropic supported, and we work to build a really diverse portfolio on the revenue side, so that we're positioned to pivot, navigate challenges. COVID's a perfect case in point. 100% of our earned income was obliterated in a matter of seconds, and we were able to pivot and navigate through that because we have a really diverse philanthropic portfolio, corporate, individual, and institutional funding. But I've had that kind of business hunger since the beginning, and my co-founder of Global Glimpse came from a business background, and so I think I was sort of uniquely indoctrinated in the nonprofit sector at 22, 23, with all of the naivety and idealism and, hunger and passion, and naivety, of course, in the world. But I was working under someone who was straight business and had a business mindset around impact. And so words like scale and, cost per student and, financial model were like some of the first words I started to absorb as I worked under him at 22, 23. And then I was very disillusioned by how he managed the organization. At a point, we parted ways, but I was left with that incredible gift that business was not a bad word, that the business structure of our organization was critical to the long-term success. And that made me really hungry to talk to business people. And so in addition to learning in my early 20s how to write grants and how to set up kind of the basic infrastructure of a nonprofit organization, I really made a point to talk to business people as well, to understand how they approach their work, to understand how they looked at and thought about the nonprofit sector. And I just learned and absorbed their language. And being able to navigate, be a chameleon, I say, if you're a fundraiser, if you're in the nonprofit sector, if you're at an executive level, it's one of the most critical skills. And to be able to do that with authenticity and integrity, so that whoever you're talking to, whether it's a mother of 6 in a dirt home in Nicaragua, or it's, a hedge fund founder who spends $2,000 on lunch. They're seeing the humanity in each of those people and understanding what their greatest desires, needs, hopes, dreams are, and being able to navigate both of them, which is hard. It's hard in the early years. I think just built this hunger for me. And so the nonprofit kind of corporate dream, as we built Global Glimpse, there was no other organization in the industry serving low-income students of color on a large scale, providing travel leadership opportunities to those students, doing so in a sustainable way. And I just knew that like the airlines were the ticket. And I was like, there's no airline that's doing anything in this space who wouldn't want to talk about making travel possible, And so I just had this dream way back in 2011, like, what if we were on the seat backs of, United Airlines or something, and it said like United Airlines making travel possible with a student with a passport for the first time, right? And the branding, like the story, just made sense to me. And I looked at their philanthropy, and it was like $10,000 to March of Dimes, or $20,000 to the San Francisco Symphony. And I was like, their philanthropy is not doing anything for their brand. Why isn't there alignment between their brand and their business bottom line and the way that they're investing in communities? Those should tell the same story. And so I think I was a bit ahead of the curve in these areas. And I started to have conversations. I reached out to, the community partnerships lead for United back in 2011. And I reached out to, I think, every other community affairs person in the airline industry. I'm sure I hit Delta, Southwest. We partnered with JetBlue for a year or two. And I just, tried to figure out who the right person was. And I think blind ambition is a great asset when you're building something, right? Like I said to my board, give me 2 years. I'm going to figure out if this is possible. If there's an avenue to standardize and reduce our air travel costs, it's a third of our budget. Like, give me 2 years. I'm going to put 100% into this, and I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did. I literally cold called, networked, got to every major leader, in the airlines and the philanthropic space, and had conversations with them, mostly hit dead ends, and then got a foot in the door with one. They gave us $10,000 in vouchers. I couldn't even use them because they were structured in such an exclusive, like, ridiculous blackout date way. They couldn't use them for group travel, but kept that going. Next year got 20,000, and then built from there, kind of a stroke of luck and strategic insight. We launched in Chicago in 2017. And United's based in Chicago, and so is Boeing. And it just so happened that our launch aligned with an initiative between Boeing and United. And I had gotten to the head of the Boeing Foundation, and he was personally on board with our work, even if it didn't quite align with the STEM focus of Boeing. And so those two coming together, Boeing brought United to the table, and United, we already had credibility with in the Bay Area. And I flew out and gave the presentation of my life, and they said, we want the Cadillac version. Here's $1 million. So that was, a 7-8 year dream, and took a lot of slow, hard work in building. But once that one locked, it kind of opened this whole understanding for me around what was possible. And it allowed me to understand how, corporate CSR works and what the structure is and how budgets are allocated, how they're approved, who manages them, whether they're under marketing or they're under a foundation or a CSR department or a people department, like who's getting approval there. And so that allowed me to kind of, formulate an understanding of the structure of how you operate in partnership with larger corporations. and also how you approach them strategically. Because when you start working with a company and they give you $1 million and your budget is 3, you're like, oh God, what do I do? Like, are you going to tell me what to do? They're probably going to tell me to do all these things. No, they want you to tell them what to do. And so that was one of the tough lessons for me. It took me a solid year to be like, oh, they're not going to tell me what to do. Like, I have to call the shots. I have to guide them. I have to manage them, because their bureaucracy is multi-level. There are 10 people working against 6 different priorities. They have 4 timelines going simultaneously. Like, the way that I can best serve in this partnership is by being hyper organized, hyper on top of things, guiding them to be able to meet their goals. So anyway, rambling a lot, but
no, not at all. And I have so many like questions and thoughts of sort of where to go from here. But I also just want to I want to thank you, because I think it is people like you who started doing this 10 years ago that have paved the way, not just for yourself, but for others, to create positive and mutually beneficial cross-sector partnerships, is making it easier for other nonprofits to send out these emails, walk into these meetings, and the companies have a different level of understanding now around the benefit of partnering with nonprofits than they did 10 years ago. And that's really thanks to folks like you. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. I want to say one other thing, and then I have just a billion questions for you. But the other thing, I think when you were talking about, the chameleon in you and your ability to hear the stories and the pain points of really diverse audiences, I just want to say the word empathy, because I think that, I think about empathy a lot from like a design thinking perspective, right? Like, what are the lenses that different people hold? What are their lived experience? What is their pain? What are their challenges? And I think sometimes in the nonprofit sector, and I think this relates to a lot of the things you were saying, we have this kind of cognitive shortcut where we're like, we're in the nonprofit sector. We're the most empathetic people ever, but we're not. And we sort of use that as a quick way to justify our not needing to be empathetic to corporate leaders or to the head of that hedge fund. And we rationalize that. And I'm saying we, like, because 100% this was me 10 years ago, right? I was like, why do I need to be empathetic to you? Like, your problems, like, they don't even, like, I can't even hear your problems, right? Like, we're trying to solve like actual problems over here. And that like lack of empathy was a huge barrier for me for many, many years, being able to build real, true partnerships. And so I just want to call that out, because I think that is something that as a sector, we need to face, frankly, and say, like, look, if we do want to really build sustainable partnerships, we need to be able to be empathetic to everyone, and really have those conversations. So I'm really glad you brought that up too.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things, like, main values we teach our students: empathy, agency, and global perspective. So, like, the ability to understand someone else, the ability to stand up for what you believe in, and the perspective to check yourself and evaluate whether you're seeing things from multiple perspectives.
Yes. Yeah. So that's all, you're teaching them how to build corporate partnerships.
I'm like, go run that hedge fund and give us all your money.
I love it. Okay. So I do want to tap into, I'm sure that folks who are listening to this are like, wait, have her talk about how she does figure out when she should be going to a corporate foundation, when she should be going to corporate CSR, when she should be going to marketing, and what are the biggest differences you see there in terms of their sort of decision-making and process.
Yeah. On this, I would zoom out a little bit in thinking about, first and foremost, like, when you're building a partnership, there has to be values and business alignment. You look at Global Glimpse, we send students from underrepresented low-income backgrounds on immersive travel, leadership, global learning opportunities. Travel's core to our model. And so finding companies that resonate with that model, with education, with youth development, with travel, is going to be our sweet spot. We might find some things that are, random fits, but in general, that's going to be our sweet spot. So finding companies that are really, really values aligned with you and their business story aligns with your business story. And bonus, if they have an in-kind value that can scale, that can add to that can help your bottom line, right? So United might only be able to give us $100,000 in cash, but if they can give us over $1 million in travel, that's $1 million we would have had to spend in cash. And it can likely scale because it costs United a heck of a lot less to send 200 more kids on United flights than it does for them to, give us that value in cash, because that's an asset that they have in their business. So finding, an in-kind avenue that really helps your business. We also partner with Away. Our students get luggage. Many of our kids have never had their own suitcase. So that's another value add for our business. If you work in a transportation arena and you partner with Uber or Lyft, that can be an in-kind value add for your business. So those two things I think are paramount to any successful partnership. Then you have to lean into the people. I mean, I know we want to read the website. Like, we want them to tell us exactly what to do, fill out the application, get the money. That's not how the world works. It's not how fundraising works. It's not how relationships work. So one really important thing that I've learned over the years is the importance of building internal advocates at every level of a company. And we've done this at Global Glimpse through regional leadership councils, which is kind of auxiliary boards, and through our board members, and then also through your advocates and donors as well. Anyone who's a champion of your organization can help you understand the inner workings of how a company functions philanthropically. Do they have a matching program? How do they incentivize that? Do they have an internal communication strategy that highlights things that they're doing that are good and important in the community? Is that housed out of their marketing, or do they have a separate CSR budget? Do they have a foundation affiliate, and how's that structured? So the more you can learn about a company that you feel is values aligned, the better. And the best way to learn that is through people that are internal. And you have kind of two avenues for that. One is an executive leader. If you have access to an executive leader and can get to them and build a relationship and build their buy-in for your cause, that's fantastic. But there's also the sort of like senior manager, director level people who have the opportunity to build their brands within a company by advocating for a cause and aligning themselves with a cause that is really meaningful to them. And they can be an even more powerful inroad for you because they're easier to get to. They're at a time in their career where they're likely starting to think about their own philanthropy and have a little bit more personal capacity. Their network has the same. And if they're a really good employee, their bosses need them. So their bosses are going to, do whatever is needed to help elevate them as leaders and employees in the company. So I just want to double underline the importance of people. Corporate partnerships do not happen without strong advocacy, leadership, commitment from people. And those people mobilize because of their personal connection to the cause and the relationship that they have with the people involved in that cause. And then once you've kind of gone through those stages, that's where you really dive into, okay, what's the nitty gritty of how the heck is this structured? Who are their partners? How much money do they allocate? What kind of, publicity, PR, marketing do they do? And so I really say to our team, when we get to this point, it breaks down into three buckets: the financial contribution that they're going to give you, whether that's cash or in kind; the engagement they're looking for, so how they want to mobilize their team, how they want their team to be involved in the work or not involved in the work; and then finally the branding, storytelling, marketing component. Every company is going to be different on this front, right? So you might have a company that's all about employee engagement and really cares about diversifying their talent pipeline. And that's their major priority. Everything is going to roll up to that initiative. And they don't really care about the PR or the storytelling. And so you're going to structure your engagement, your proposal, every touch point with that company with their priorities in mind, not what you think they should want, not what you want. Though it is important what you want, you're going to need to figure out how those merge and blend and meld together. But you're going to really focus on understanding what their needs are and then how you can best fill their needs while also adding the value that makes it worthwhile for you to invest to support that partnership. So corporate dollars can get a lot bigger than, you know, individual or institutional funding pretty quickly, and they can be sustainable in a way that other forms of fundraising are less sustainable. But they can also suck an organization dry. So
Totally.
How you approach that process and how you learn to quantify your work when you get to that point. So, you know, to your original question around like, how do you break that down? To me, it's less about what bucket the funding is coming from and more about who is overseeing that funding, what their needs are, and how you are aligning your needs and the value the company brings to your work with, you know, the company's needs. And when you hit that sweet spot, it's like you're bringing in significant resources to the organization, and the touch points you have with that company are touch points that bring value to employees, that bring value to the company, and that actually bring value to your team as well, and to, you know, the overall culture of your collaboration. So it's not easy to do, but when you do it right, it feels really good. And that's what I always say to the team and to our partners, like this should always feel really good, whether it's an individual donor or a corporate partner. Like it should feel really good. If it feels icky, then something's off.
I love that. And I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, just to sort of highlight for folks when you were talking about the relationship piece and how critical that is, and the relationship building there. And I do want to say, and you might disagree with me on this, but I tend to not avoid those moments in these conversations, is that, you know, I feel like I'm a big advocate for cold outreach. And the reason why is because I think that we have this perception inside the nonprofit sector that relationships can only be built with a warm connection and an introduction to a very specific leader. And I actually think it's pretty easy to build relationships with corporate partners and build trust with them, as long as you're speaking to them and you are bringing that empathy and you're speaking to them from that lens. I'm also a big advocate for like the manager, director, alliance piece, because first of all, I think it's totally overlooked, right? Like everyone's like, I want to talk to the VP of marketing. And I'm like, why? Like just, you know, and so like, I'm also a big advocate for that strategy. And I think, look, the thing that's going to help them be an advocate for you by making that business case, right? Like that person is being held to certain expectations, to certain standards, to certain metrics. The moment you are aligning yourself with that need of theirs, it opens up the conversations. I can't even tell you, I had a call, gosh, maybe it was like 2 years ago now, it was actually the head of marketing for this startup. But I said to him on the call, I said, you know, I was like, look, I just want to be really honest. Like, I really want to see the whole ecosystem around this issue succeed. So like, can you just tell me a little bit, like some of your like marketing goals or brand awareness goals, and what is keeping you up at night in terms of achieving them? And like, his shoulders relaxed and he was just like, I have been doing this for so long. No one has ever asked me that. And no one has even like kind of he like leaned in, like the whole conversation shifted. He started telling me what all these other nonprofits had been asking for, the amounts and for what, and what he was sorting through. Like I was his team member, like I started to be a part of his team to achieve his goal and figure out where my organization fit in and where it didn't. And that's the other thing. I think that a lot of trust is built when we're honest. When we say, the moment we say, we're so afraid, and I know we want to talk about this too, but we're so afraid often to not just do the first thing the company asks us to do, right? But to oh, they want a volunteer workday. Okay, they must know why they want that volunteer workday and all the, what it's going to do for them. And we're so sort of afraid to push back. But from my experience, what I've really found is the moment I do push back, or the moment I say something isn't a fit, the trust, it explodes, because the company knows that no, not all money is created equal. And I don't just want your money. I actually want this to be the right fit for both of us. And the moment they really realize that, because they have a lot of perceptions about the nonprofit sector, the way we have, inside the nonprofit sector about the for-profit sector. And the moment we start to break out of some of those patterns, I've just noticed such a huge difference. And I'd be curious what you think about all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this goes back to the importance of asking questions, right? From the beginning, the way that you build a successful partnership in any space, but especially in the corporate space, is by asking questions. And I'll give a little example right now that I think is a pertinent one. Yeah. I also wholeheartedly believe in cold outreach, to a ridiculous degree. My whole team makes fun of me. I'm the queen of LinkedIn, literally. And so I found out about this network, Women Leading Travel and Hospitality. It launched last year. I joined it right away, got all the bios. It's basically every executive woman in the travel space. And so I pulled all their emails, wrote them all on LinkedIn, and said, would love to, chat and learn about your work and learn about your leadership, and share the work I do at Global Glimpse. Had a number of calls. Spoke with one of the executives at Travel Zoo, which is kind of a travel discount website. We had a great call. There was a lot of personal alignment, but not really clear next steps. And it was kind of in the middle of the pandemic. I wasn't making any asks around anyone in the travel space. But I made that connection. It's very easy in the virtual space to get 30 minutes on somebody's calendar. Totally. And these people are often pining for something inspiring. So you're the inspiring 30 minutes of their day. And if you see it that way, you're not asking for anything. You're just changing the way someone's energy is operating on Zoom with the 10 other things they're dealing with, which are not fun that day. So we had a great conversation. And then out of the blue, maybe 9 months later, the person who's running their kind of community impact initiative reached out to me and said, would love to chat. Nina mentioned you, as we're starting to build this out. And I looked you up, and I'm just so touched by the work you guys do. Could we talk? So we talked for 30 minutes, and she said, I have this idea. I'd like to have our employees go on field trips with kids from schools in their cities. And I was like, okay, that sounds like running a whole organization. You guys probably don't have capacity to do that. What about liability? And so I was able to basically, guide her to a point where, I understood their needs. They want to be able to tell a story. They want their employees to connect with young people. They want it to be about access and equity in travel. Travel wasn't really possible in the pandemic. So they were like, well, what about field trips? And so I could guide them to a place where they made a $5,000 commitment to our year-end campaign we're launching next month. And we're talking with them around, a $30,000 commitment left next year to support 10 students to travel for the first time, and thinking about how we build this story between now and then. And so I think the point here is everyone's on their own journey, just like you wouldn't, bullishly ask your friend to do something if you knew that they were juggling some tough stuff in their life. You have to approach everybody you encounter with that same kind of mindset in a professional setting. And so when you have an opportunity to connect with someone, you connect and you listen and you hear them and you share, honestly about where you are, and you open a door and you plant a seed, and then you slowly cultivate those seeds over time. And when someone has a need, you're front of mind, and you're able to come, and bring that full circle, and create something that adds value for both parties. But it all stems from listening at the beginning, and that's hard to do when you're like, oh my God, I have $1 million goal and I'm on this time crunch, and I feel all this pressure. So I feel the pain of early fundraisers, and just really encourage patience and trust in relationships, and trust that the right things will come through in their time if you take the steps that are truly in line with your values.
Yeah. And I would say, you were saying at the beginning of this how business was kind of a bad word. And I think the same thing is true about money. I hear a lot in our space, don't be transactional. And the assumption there around that is don't talk about money, right? Like get to know someone, build a relationship for 18 months, 12 to 18 months before you even bring up money. And I'm like, no, money is not a bad word, actually. And those companies, like, I think it's like I totally agree with you, right? Like, listen, meet people where they're at, and recognize that money is a vehicle for a lot of things. And so those companies, they might be looking at how to spend money right then. Yes, travel companies during the pandemic, but I watched so much paralysis during the pandemic, and I was like, your corporate partners are trying to figure out how to how to strategically invest right now. If you are that option for them, and in general, I don't think fundraising is an ask. Like, I think if you approach it this way, you are offering an opportunity, whether it's brand alignment, audience alignment, engagement, all the things you laid out. And so I just want people, like, yes, invest in the relationships. And you're right, holding both of these things to be true at the same time is so hard. The like patience and transparency, right? Like, it's like those are really hard things to hold together. But I think, from my experience, like, I've closed multi-100,000, like $250,000 in a 1 hour first 1 hour conversation with a company. But the alignment was so clear. And like, we were able to get so deep into the nitty gritty right away, because it was like, once I started to ask them about what they wanted and what they needed, and we were like riffing off of each other. And it's like, oh yeah, like, how about you don't build an entire education program, because we have that education program. So like, why don't you just, like, instead of building your $15 million platform, you just like invest in us. There's just so much opportunity. And I think what you're, and this is hard to teach, right? Like, you are talking about so many concepts that are really hard to teach.
Big concepts.
Right? Like intuition, like listening
One thing
to yourself.
I'll like double click on here that I learned, that took me a long time to learn, was when you get to the nitty gritty of like building a corporate ask, structuring that ask in a way that allows you to build in the costs, what it costs you to actually maintain that partnership. And I don't think we do that enough, or have any kind of education around how to do that in the nonprofit sector. So there's kind of valuing the impact that they are buying, right? So they're sending, 50 students, or they're purchasing, a program or a course for 100 people, or whatever you're quantifying that impact is. There's a cost line there, right? And then on top of that, you're committing to provide certain things to that company, right? So you have your cost per student, call it $1,000. For every $1,000 they give you, you can serve one student. But if they also ask you to write a press release, to do a bunch of social posts, to organize a community event for their team, to this, that, and the other engagement activity, those are costs that you didn't have before. And so your cost per student, when you net it out and you add in the overhead, is more. And we don't allow ourselves that ability. We're too scared of losing those direct dollars to talk about the sustainability component and what it actually takes us to deliver on a successful partnership. And so that's where, going back to kind of the three main areas of structuring corporate partnerships, there's your financial investment, your engagement, and your brand alignment. And the way that we do this is in a tiered structure. So I would suggest when you get to that point, you're negotiating and you're really in the thick of it with a corporate partner, structure your proposals with 3 tiers. The bottom tier is too low. You're not offering things that they want on the brand and engagement side. The middle tier is like probably just about right, maybe a little bit ambitious. You're, asking for about what you think they can do financially, and you're offering just about what they want in terms of engagement and branding, marketing, etc. And then you have a top tier that's the vision. Like, this is where we can be in 2 to 3 years. And so that financial ask is higher than you think that they can do, possibly, but it really outlines your needs and the impact that you want to have in partnership with them. And then your engagement would be incredible, but it would take a good amount more resources for your team to pull it off and facilitate it. And then, same thing on kind of the storytelling element. And when you structure it that way, it looks super professional. So when they get it, they're like, oh, they really know their stuff. And they feel they have options, and you allow them to mix and match. Like, hey, we do want a board seat, but we don't want, a press release. We do want a feature on your homepage, but we don't want, to do a special report or whatever it is. You're going to let them pick and choose and maybe even suggest things. But the more you can put those things in a box, especially your engagement activities, because those are the ones that take the most effort, that we undersell the most in the sector. The second you have to mobilize 6 of your team members to organize something, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars of staff capacity that could be going to other things, right? So you really want to look at the ROI on any engagement activities. But that mindset has been game changing for us in terms of how we structure and think about partnerships, and how we structure proposals overall, and how we build in an ask, to directly support the engagement activities, which are on top of what it costs to run the general impact that they want to drive.
Okay, I think you would love Power Partners, because that is exactly what I teach people how to do.
I love it.
Actually, I put the impact as a benefit. I don't even relate that to the price at all. Like, pretty much, like, for the lowest amount, it's like the impact, your name on the website, on the newsletter, whatever. Like, you're right, nothing else. And the other thing I say a lot is, like, that top sponsorship number, I don't always do 3. I love this idea of thinking about 3 and then letting people like pick and choose. I usually do 5. And what's interesting, though, is that what I tell people a lot is that the top number is an indicator of how much you value your value as an organization. And so if your top sponsorship level is $10,000, that is not setting a good tone for the amount of value you feel like you could bring a company. So my shorthand is 10x it. So people who are listening right now, take your top sponsorship, 10x it, and then build benefits around it. What would it take for you to have a $500,000 top sponsorship? What do you think if you were going to throw all the spaghetti at the wall and really show up from a content branding perspective, from an engagement perspective, from an impact perspective? And you're right. I think the other thing is when those benefits really speak to business outcomes, even things like impressions, audience size, all those things, they know you see them and that you get what they're trying to do. And that opens up the conversation for them to be creative too, but to recognize that they're really going to come back with ideas that you're going to understand because you met them where they're at from the beginning.
100%.
Okay, I know we could talk forever. I just want to thank you so much for having this conversation. You're so brilliant.
It's been
and
so fun.
Yeah.
I'd love to keep it going and hope to be a resource for anyone who's navigating any of this in the sector. It's a real joy to me to share this knowledge and broaden, the opportunities that we all have access to do the work that we're so committed to do.
What is the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Email is probably great. Just Eliza@globalglimpse.org.
Okay.
Or if you go to our website, globalglimpse.org, the team will get it to me, I promise.
Thank you.